On today's episode, we have Rob's PHT success story. Welcome to the podcast helping you overcome your proximal hamstring tendinopathy. This podcast is designed to help you understand this condition, learn the most effective evidence-based treatments, and of course, bust the widespread misconceptions. My name is Brodie Sharpe. I'm an online physiotherapist, recreational athlete, creator of the Run Smarter series, and a chronic proximal hamstring tendinopathy battler. Whether you are an athlete or not, this podcast will educate and empower you in taking the right steps to overcome this horrible condition. So let's give you the right knowledge along with practical takeaways in today's lesson. Thanks for joining me once again. We have another success story episode. I know these are very popular and highly requested. And if you have your own success from either listening to the podcast or just on your own, having your own insights, reach out. We can see if this format and jumping on for a podcast episode is a nice story, a nice compelling insight that would help a whole bunch of other people, because even just in particular this week, I've come across a lot of injury chats where people have been very discouraged and in a very, I guess, negative mindset because websites, forums, Facebook groups, just all of those tends to manifest a bit of negativity. Usually the ones who have had it for the longest and it's been the worst and they've tried everything in their mind and they can't find the answers, they're the ones that are likely going to post and publish and ask. Understandably, if you're in a lot of pain and you're confused, posting those sorts of things is what you want to do. But someone else can, join that forum or join that group and then scroll down the feed and be like, oh my God, am I ever going to get rid of this? It looks like this is a condition that is never going to get better. It doesn't seem to get better for anyone. And that could negatively impact your own rehab. And so because the way that these pages and forums and groups naturally gravitate the worst and tend to naturally compel the worst to publish, that sort of stuff, it just looks a lot more skewed. There's a lot more of a skewed population sample size, and it can look all doom and gloom. But this podcast here is here to spread a bit of positivity, encourage you that you can overcome this, and there are ways to do it. And so these success stories are to show that yes, they have been there. Yes, they have had these mindsets of, is this ever going to get better? And they've started doing the right things, investing in the right knowledge, implementing the right strategies, pretty much what this podcast entails. And you know what? They get better. And let's sing it from the rooftops. Let's, publish it to everyone who feels like they need it, to everyone who feels like they need that positivity. So that's one of the main things that I love about this podcast, having that forum. So if you have some positivity to spread, reach out to me, let me know. And we can dive into Rob's success story, who he is a urologist, he's a surgeon, he's a scientist, as he will explain, and has a pretty compelling rehab success story. A lot of lessons, a lot of insights, and you're going to love it. So let's hear from Rob. Thanks for joining me on the podcast, Rob.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very happy to get you on to tell your story because it seems like it's been quite a long yet, now rewarding journey. For those who would like a bit of a backstory before we get into the PHT stuff, could you just maybe introduce yourself and sort of a bit of insight into your background?
Yeah, thanks. My name is Rob, and I'm in Texas, San Antonio, Texas, and I am a urologist. I'm a surgeon and a scientist, and I've been running for a few decades now. I started out with triathlons, and then I quickly went into trail running. So my favorite type of runs were long distance ultra runs. I did a lot of marathons and a lot of long distance trail running.
Excellent. And so what are some of the races that you have completed? Do you have any of your
Yeah,
favorites?
Yeah, so I mean, I started out doing, just trail runs that were available in the community. And as I worked my way up, 50 milers were kind of, 50K and then 50 milers. I've done 200 milers. One was Leadville, and I finished under 25 hours for Leadville, which was really a great race. I did another 100 miler in southern Oregon. It was called Pine to Palm, and I've done a bunch of sub 100 miler ultras, 50 milers, 50Ks, things like that. And then I also kind of routinely did a marathon each year, the San Antonio Marathon. But I'm not a super fast runner. Like I haven't qualified for Boston yet, but I did okay on the ultra runs. I guess I like that terrain better.
Hmm. Prior to the PHT, did you have any other significant running related injuries doing this long distance stuff?
Oh, you bet. I mean, I, you name it, I've injured it. And that was part of the problem because you get so used to managing your own injuries. I've had Achilles, I had plantar fasciitis, I had IT band. Um, so yeah, I've had plenty. And the next question would be, well, how did you manage those? And it was for me, it was always just stop running, rest, and they got better. And I mean, I had a serious Achilles tendinopathy, and I remember just taking 2 weeks or maybe 4 weeks at most off, and I was able to come back, but
Okay.
not with the hamstring, as we'll
Yeah.
talk about, I'm sure.
Let's get into it. So, was it during any particular part of your training or any particular factors that led to the onset of PHT?
Yeah, as I was kind of thinking back on what led up to it, and this has been several years now. I mean, my injury occurred in 2017, and it was the fall of 2017, and that was a busy year. I had run a lot of ultras, and I was just running like I had no limit. It was I would just sign up and do the next race, and I ran a a downhill marathon in Utah in September of 2017. It was a big cottonwood, and my wife was trying to qualify for Boston, so I said, "Oh, I'll run with you." And that evening before that race was when I first felt the hamstring. But so leading up to that, and I ran it anyway. I ran it the next day despite that pain. But leading up to that, I had run, an ultra maybe a month before, like a 50 miler or something, maybe a 50K before, a month before. And that whole summer, I was running long distances. So I think a combination of ultra running and then speed work on top of that to try to run for marathon. If I had, and plus my age, I mean, I'm, uh, 46 now. So as I was getting older, I think that combination may have led to this, and absence of any other strength training.
It's very hard to identify like a training, like an increase in your training load or an abrupt change in your training load when you're just going from race to race and you're already at such high mileage. Like when you operate at such a high mileage and just willy nilly picking races to go to, it's fun, but I guess lacks a bit of structure or lacks. It's not like that gentle build up and prepare for one race and then you have an off season and then gently build up again. It's that lack in structure can catch you off guard at times.
Absolutely. And I felt invincible. I mean, I felt that I knew I could get through injuries before, and I felt that I could run anything. I mean, I knew I had to watch my speed, but I didn't carefully watch my mileage as I should have.
Hmm. And so you said that prior to that race, symptoms started. That's when you first felt it in the hamstring. What were the sensations like?
Yeah, I was. It was. It's so funny because I remember that whole evening so clearly. I was using my wife's this uh, um, what is it? It was just a ball that I was just rolling my leg out, and I felt pain in my left, uh, what we call the sits bone or the ischial tuberosity, very high part of my hamstring. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't felt it when I was running, but that's really tender. And I thought about it for a few seconds, or maybe less than a minute, and didn't think anything more about it. Said, oh, it's just a little minor pain, but it was clear that that was a sign of things to come. So it was just a pain with pressure from um, that lacrosse ball that elicited it. But it was not. There was other than that other than using the ball, I had no pain at rest, and I didn't remember any pain before when I was running. And the next day, the marathon started high at a high altitude and it was all downhill. I don't remember any pain during that race. And I finished that race with a an okay time for me. I wasn't limited by pain. Um, it was a couple of races later, like a short distance 8 miler that maybe was 2 or 3 weeks later, where I had to stop and I couldn't finish it. I had to walk back to the finish line, and
Hmm.
that's like October 2017, and that's when it really set in that I have something that's not trivial.
Okay. So would you have said over that course of 2 to 3 weeks after the marathon that symptoms just started to linger and just become more annoying up until the point where you had to quit that race?
It was subtle. Like I didn't really appreciate the symptoms at that time when I wasn't running. I don't remember having symptoms in the very beginning. But after I ran that 8 miler in that where I had to walk, then I really noticed that I had symptoms at rest or symptoms without running.
Hmm. Okay. And so I guess the level of urgency started to rise. And what did you seek answers? Like, did you have a diagnosis pretty early?
Yeah, I mean, so I read and I tried to distinguish um, a hamstring injury versus sciatica versus a oh, the kind of used a differential, and I think I figured out that it was hamstring, and then I did the usual approach, which is rest and stop running. And I remember that year I was signed up for a marathon in December and didn't run it. And I thought 2 weeks. At first, I thought 1 week and started running again. That didn't work. And then I tried 2 weeks. Then I tried a month, and it was that kind of thing. And because usually a month, that's the most I've ever had to take off to heal a tendinopathy.
Hmm. I guess it's very much like human nature when there is an injury to say, okay, my body would just do a good job if I rest it. Body does a good job of healing, so let me just take time off. And that's usually like a pain, rest, weakness, downward spiral that I like to um, talk about on the podcast, and it just fosters a bit of weakness. But did you notice that, like in those rest periods, was there pain like day to day stuff, or was it only once you just resumed running that you're like, yep, still there, let me take more time off?
It was pain even during those rest periods. So the pain never went away, and I didn't feel that I was that the maybe in the very like when it was super intense, maybe it got a little better with rest, but honestly, the pain was there during the rest period,
Hmm.
and and it just wouldn't go away.
Okay. And so at what time did you shift your focus away from rest isn't working and start looking for other alternatives?
Yeah, so I think it must have been moving into the new year 2018. So that's 6 weeks. I've been out for about 6 weeks now, not healing on my own, not healing with my usual approaches. And so I sought physical therapy, um, and and did that for a while. Uh, you know, and at that time, the physical therapy, and I can go into that detail too, Brody, if you want. But that the physical therapy that I did at that time was a lot of stretching and some very basic, isometric, bridge, a lot of bridges and kind of very basic things, which, um, are good or fine, but I didn't get better quickly enough, and I kind of got discouraged.
Okay. Did you notice or can you remember if the stretching was more effective than the isometrics?
I never felt that stretching helped.
Hmm.
I mean, I say that now, like I don't stretch now. I mean, other than, a little bit, but I never felt that stretching helped me. If anything, it hurt me.
Okay. And the isometric bridges, so holding those glute bridges, did you notice any improvement?
If there was improvement, it was very minor. Um, I will say that for me at least, the like a single leg bent, where my knee is bent, and then I'm raising up that was a good assessment for me. So that could really elicit the pain if I were to do that maneuver. And so, and it would just cause the pain immediately. And so as I did the isometric, uh, the single leg bridges, I got a little stronger, and so that assessment, that raising wouldn't hurt as bad. So I think that was some area of improvement, but it
Hmm.
didn't help me to have, with regards to running. I didn't get better with running at that
Yeah.
point.
Which makes sense because oftentimes people are prescribed glute bridges and they see some noticeable improvement, as mild as it might be, but is less functional. So if you're wanting your capacity to raise, 50 times to at least get to the demands of running, a glute bridge is like, raising it up to 5 or raising it up to 10. So there's like a little hiccup of improvement, but the tendon's craving like a progression. Let's get heavier. Let's get into more meaningful, functional sort of movements. But a lot of people surprisingly just stick to the glute bridge, whether it's because they have that initial success or because any other progression causes mild discomfort. They just stick to that home base and then don't. It just plateaus and just stays there. But interesting to hear your experience as well.
Yeah,
So
and I think your point. So, and there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I was even told, I saw two orthopedic surgeons, and at one point I was told, don't do exercises that cause pain. And so I was fearful, really, of doing things that would elicit the pain. And so I think and that was early on in this process. And so I think that had an impact on what I was, willing to try or do, because I was worried that that would make things worse.
mm, especially when it comes from like an orthopedic surgeon, like you'd hold their advice to a very high regard and, like you
Yeah,
say, become fearful of
yeah.
producing symptoms.
And I don't know. Maybe I misinterpreted it. It's hard to know because you're getting so many different pieces of advice, and so I don't exactly remember that conversation, how it played out, but I do know I had a fear of injuring it worse, and I
Mm.
know that delayed my recovery.
Yeah, and it's very common. Like I talk to people with PHT all the time, and they're worried to do a weighted exercise because they're worried about if it does cause pain, will it further damage my tendon? Will it get worse? Will these tears that are in there, will it re-tear or will it cause more tears or will it rupture? And like all this fear and threatening language that they use that have probably been used by health professionals. That's why they're getting it. But key point on this, that's a very honest answer to, you know, how what was said might be different from what you interpreted or how you walked away from that session. Because I know a lot of times when I'm talking with clients, I'll try as much reassuring language as possible and say it's okay to load. And then sometimes if I get them to repeat, what's been said throughout the conversation, they'll say, okay, so you're saying that it's bad to load the tendon or whatever. So what I'm saying and what they're interpreting is two completely different scenarios. And so people can walk away from a consult with a not what was intended, but to have, maybe they have preconceived ideas and they stick to those preconceived ideas before contrary advice is laid upon them. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
The Well, I guess so. Moving away after these bridges and stretches, you saw this PT. You got discouraged because there was no real carryover benefit into your running. What was the next step of your rehab journey?
Yeah, I mean, you name it, I did it. I tried a masseuse, I tried dry needling, I tried different physiotherapy. I did this 10x procedure, which is an ultrasound guided percutaneous needle tenotomy, where they
Can
just
you explain exactly what that is? Yeah.
yeah, so they use an X-ray to guide placement of a this metal sheath, and it's a small diameter. I mean, the size, I mean, smaller than like it's like a large bore needle that is placed near your ischial tuberosity, and they use this high frequency ultrasound, which the idea is that it targets the unhealthy tendon tissue but doesn't hurt the healthy tissue. And it does have some, like most of these things, it has some data that supports it. And, we can talk about that, um, but it didn't work for me. It was a brief procedure. It didn't hurt me, I don't think, but it didn't work. I also had PRP, platelet-rich plasma injections, two of those. Um, and so all of these different things, I would say, I altered my diet. I did a lot of different things. And each time, and I have to say, I was at one point, I'm an ultra runner. It's a part of my identity. And I got really, bummed out and maybe not, clinically depressed, but I was very down. And I say that because I know a lot of people out there are feeling this, and you know, it can really affect your kind of day to day living. So I was willing to try anything, and every time I like signed up for something or I had an appointment, it gave me a little hope, and I was kind of looking forward to the visit. And this was just a cycle. I'd look forward to this next visit. Maybe this is going to do it, and then I'd crash, and then I'd go, again. And this is how it went for 2 years.
Mm.
But so those are the things that I tried.
Seems to be like all the procedure type of things, or manual therapy, so the dry needling and the massage and all of that. I guess blanket sort of treatments.
I did do, and I did do in terms of physical therapy. I mean, I think my physical therapy was probably on the right track, but I gave up on it too soon. It wasn't progressing as fast as I wanted, and I thought, oh, it's not working. I was doing some prone leg curls, some supine leg curls with the Swiss ball, which I think are helpful. Um, but and but none of the stuff that I did had weights involved, and that was the one thing missing. So I did a lot of physical therapy, but I didn't use any weights.
Mm.
And so it wasn't that I wasn't doing physical therapy, and I mean I was really trying from that
Yeah, I'm
standpoint.
glad you're honest about the identity crisis as well, and having it affect your mood, because it is like for runners, for athletes, triathletes. We hold a particular identity when it comes to our athletic endeavors, especially when it's such a part of your life, like it is, and well, like it was. And when that's taken away, you sort of question a lot, and you know, people get moody, people get frustrated, people like their relationships become strained, their sleep becomes poor, their diet becomes poor, just because there's that missing piece of what was, complete in their life. It's now taken away. And it's sort of mixed with, yes, that's taken away, but also you're in pain because pain's very closely linked to despair. And so you've got this worry, this fear, this the one thing that gives you a sense of well-being is now taken away, and you're in pain. Like that whole combination of things is just really, really does negatively affect your mood and well-being.
Absolutely. And if running is your outlet for stress, and now you don't have that outlet, it's it's it is hard, and it's hard to replace it. I tried cycling and swimming, um, and I felt pain with doing all of that, and I got scared, like I can't do this because I'm having
Mm,
pain. And so, um, you're absolutely right, and the things that you're saying are resonating because it really did affect my entire well-being, not
mm.
being able to train and run.
When did things sort of turn? When did things start making improvements and you start seeing a bit of hope and a bit of light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, so it was really when I started listening to your podcast. Honestly, this was 2021, so I think, and it was the end of 2021, and I had just started listening to your podcast. And what struck me, and I have to say, like I said, I was a scientist, so I had read all the literature or a lot of the literature on this, and so I knew that most of the papers out there, they're not randomized controlled clinical trials. I mean, they utilize some new approach, and then some patients got better, some didn't, and so there's evidence that it works, but you don't, without a control population, you don't really know. And so there's just a paucity of evidence, real good evidence for managing PHT. Fortunately, there is some data in other tendinopathies, but when I heard you speak, immediately realized that you had a lot of experience in PHT, and you had experience working with runners. And it may have been that timing was that I was receptive to it at this time, because it could have been that one of my other physical therapists told me the same thing, but I just didn't hear it. But what you had said on one of the podcasts was the importance of specific exercises, especially deadlifts. And I was like, wow, I don't do deadlifts because I'm afraid to do deadlifts. That is something that really elicits the pain. And so, I was just immediately captivated by your podcast, and so I reached out to you, and that's when the real healing began.
It's funny that you say the deadlifts are the things I shy away from because that's the one that almost hurts the most. And it kind of hurts the most because it targets that area more specifically than any other exercise. And it's designed in a way to target the upper hamstring in the most localized way possible. And so that's what makes that exercise the worst thing, but also the best thing. And it's just about finding the right condition because people can I see it all the time. People really quickly jump into deadlifts either with too much range of movement or too heavy or too many reps and flares them up and kind of confirms their belief. Okay, yep, I should just remove that. Don't even think about deadlifts. I'm not ready. It's too painful, but they're not giving themselves the right condition because maybe their starting point's a little bit too low. Um, and yeah, they've just jumped the gun a little bit too much. And there's always some particular modification that you can start with. And um, I'm glad that sort of that resonated with you or caught you at the right moment of your rehab to start resonating with you. And so I guess we obviously started working together. We jumped on a call and then got to work with an action plan.
Yeah, no, I remember the first visit with you, um, and I remember that you had clued into the pain. So when I did deadlifts, um, I started with the low weight, and I said, I have this pain that comes on with deadlifts, but yet when I'm done with the deadlift, it actually feels better in some cases. And I don't know, but what I remember was that you immediately kind of recognize this as is the PHT that you've seen before in other athletes, and you gave me some reassurance. Like you said, Rob, I've done this before. And what you're experiencing is normal, and that's a good sign. And it was like such a relief, such a great feeling to think that there's hope. Like I may be able to run. And at that time, I was not even. It's just like maybe I'll be able to do a 5K. Maybe I can do the turkey trot again. I mean, I did a turkey trot on crutches once. I was like, we'd always done a turkey trot for Thanksgiving, and I'm going to go out there, and if I can't run it, I'm going to do it with crutches. It was just so silly. But when I met you and I had that initial visit, I really gave me a lot of hope, and I I, uh, I think that it was a great feeling.
Can you recall what how long it took for you to recognize that the path that we set forward was starting to work?
Yeah, probably a month. So before I started meeting with you regularly, I'd kind of, through listening to your podcast, kind of started my own rehab program based on what you had recommended. And so when I had actually met with you, I was already into it a little bit, but I didn't really progress on the running. And so even though I was getting stronger, I didn't test it on the track because, I was still scared. So once we had met and then you started looking at my exercise plan and you had a running plan for me, I would say it took about maybe 3 to 4 weeks to, that I really realized that, I'm able to get, my running is getting, I'm able to improve. So I'd say about a month.
Okay. And what was your usual symptoms during a run? Like, was there any pain during? Was it um, increasing symptoms afterwards? Would there be a particular characteristic or trait that was consistent?
Yeah, so it would be pain in the ischial tuberosity, right at the high insertion point of the hamstring. It would sometimes radiate down to the belly of the hamstring, on the, you know, but and sometimes I'd only feel it in the belly, like in the middle part, but usually it's at the sits bone, and you know, it would be worse with as I ran longer or I ran faster, and you know, before I started working with you, that pain would stay. It would be worse after the running, and it would just stay there for days, until I just had to let it heal. But after, when I was working with you and I was training, the pain would, might come on during running, but then would immediately stop when I was running, or it wouldn't last very long.
Hmm.
Yesterday I ran 7 miles. I had a little bit of pain um, at toward the end, but immediately it was gone after I was done.
Yeah. I, I tend to see a particular pattern around how strong the tendon is and how quickly you revert back to baseline once you've challenged the tendon a bit. And, if people just keep to body weight exercises and then they do a run and that aggravates their symptoms, they could be sore for several days, similar to what you were experiencing. But what I see often in clients is the stronger you get the tendon, so that's with slow, heavy deadlifts and building up and ramping up that tolerance, they can have a similar amount of pain during the run. And like you say, just that particular irritation just totally backs off, sometimes within 60 minutes. So what was once 5 days of irritation is now less than an hour. And that's what I would kind of interpret or contribute to. Okay, the tendon is now robust. And yes, it might be sore because you're challenging it and you're pushing its capabilities, but is robust and strong enough just to quickly settle.
Yeah, makes sense.
How about any other particular challenges? So, our management plan, slowly building up the deadlifts, slowly increasing your running. Um, was there anything else that you may have found effective in terms of moving the needle and accelerating that healing process?
Effective? Is that
Effective, yeah.
effective? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the so if I could kind of summarize it, I mean, I think the progression is key, and not just with the exercises, but also with running. So, you had me progressing on the weights, how much weight I did, but you also had me at the same time progressing on my running, whether it was we were progressing with speed or distance or uh, elevation, whatever it was, we were progressing. Um, and so that was, I think, critical, and it has to be controlled. It has to be, careful progression. But I think progression for me was key. And I remember I keep asking you, do I ever stop like adding weight? I mean, I'm like one of the, I'm doing too much on squats. Am I ever going to get to a point where you're going to be like, that's enough? And you said, no, just keep going. So it was kind of funny. Um, so I think that the progression, with the right exercises and the right, timing of progressions, like, I didn't rush it, and I was patient. I think being patient is critical. If you try to move through this really quickly in 4 weeks, you could risk, um, you know, t- uh, taking a major setback. So I was at that point, I had been injured for over 2 years. So my hope was not to get back to racing. I would just wanted to get to running again. And so I think my attitude was different. I was no longer like, I'm gonna run this race next month, and I need to figure out how to do it. I was like, I just want to be able to run, and so I entered our program with a really good attitude. So being patient, um, and I think it's critical that the types of exercises in the weight bearing, was also important.
Hmm. Well, what I usually say, particularly for runners, so I don't always work with runners with PHT. I work with anyone with PHT, but the runners that I like to work with, I sort of talk about you want to work on two pillars at the same time. So you've got your strength training, which is, your squats, deadlifts, lunges, calf raises. You want to slowly build that up and build up that slow, heavy load. But concurrently, you kind of want to build up your running tolerance at the same time. And both of those pillars, you want to be systematic about it. You want to be progressive and slowly build in the next layer, the next layer, the next layer. And provided that those two pillars don't progress like on the one day, you might progress, you know, on alternate days or, different times throughout the week. But, the goal should always be you can tolerate more running loads once you can tolerate more weights in the gym and vice versa. So both of those components are stimulating the tendon in two completely different ways, but you're just restoring the capacity in those two stimuli at the same time. And so I guess that's where you found that benefit, and you're sort of concurrently seeing two two victories in two different domains.
Yeah, and I think the running, it's just healthy, for me to see that I'm improving, and it can be, in the very beginning, it was a small amount, but just to have that as, it was kind of like positive reinforcement, oh, okay, I see the benefit of this, of going to the gym and doing the weights, because I'm seeing that I'm able to run a little bit more the next day or whatever. So
Hmm.
that was important for me.
Yeah. Okay. And so were there any hiccups? Were there any setbacks, any flare ups, anything like that?
I never had a serious flare up. I had times when I was concerned that maybe I pushed myself a little bit too hard. I told you, I was very honest with you. I said, hey, when we started racing again, I had some pain during racing, um, but it was never where I had to stop. Since I've met you, Brody, I never had to just, stop and rest. And so I think that whatever course we set on, it's been working. And when we first started, you had me walk running, and so I would, run, and I ran a half marathon. I think probably 6 to 8 weeks after I met you, and I walk ran it. Um, and and I did get like to a 6 out of 10 pain toward the end, but it immediately went away the next day. And so, like you said earlier, the 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 duration of pain after the event was short, and that suggests that there's a pretty strong tendon.
Hmm. But also showing like in the moment with those high levels of pain, probably that, you know, the tendon might not have been ready for it. And, being with a race saying, okay, well, let me just see how I go. But on the back end, you have that luxury of it returning back to baseline really quickly and saying, yeah, I know I overdone it. Maybe ran a little bit too far, a little bit too fast, or maybe the elevation was a bit too much. But I know that. I know that now. And now I'm 1, 2 days later, back to baseline. I'll learn from that and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, but I never had a serious setback where I had to stop, and restart the clock. So I'm
Hmm.
I'm I'm very, grateful for that.
Excellent. And I guess moving on from there, fast forward to today, what have you managed to
Yeah.
return to?
So, after I met, we worked, I did that half marathon. The next month, after that half marathon, I did a 25K. You walked me through that. And that's 15 miles roughly. And that was hilly. And you were a little concerned about me going in for a hilly race, but you let me do it, and we did okay. I mean, I didn't have any long-term pain after that, and I was able to continue. So then I just kind of kept working at it and working at it, and I worked my way up over a year. Over a year of time building, such that this year I ran a marathon in December. Oh, sorry, in December of 2022. So last month I ran a marathon. My pace, it was 3:33. So, and my fastest marathon right now is around 3:12. So it's not too far off my fastest time. And I felt great. I mean, I did have some pain during the race. Toward the end, I would say it even got to a 7 at one point, you know, but the next day I felt fine. I was sore more in other areas than I was in my hamstring, and I was able to kind of continue to run. I'm still running now. So I'm currently, my wife has gone to Boston multiple times, and I just go and watch her. So I'd really love to be able to run with her. So my goal right now is to qualify, which for me is like 3:15 or actually 3:20 maybe. But anyway, I really want to beat my old record, which is a 3:12 marathon. And then I like to get back to doing trail running, eventually do another 100 miler. But right now I'm just taking one step at a time. I just want to qualify for Boston first, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. And also a good sign that when you do that marathon, yeah, you're sore, but you're sore in every other joint and muscle and that sort of thing as well. So it's almost like your tendon has caught up to the capacity of the rest of the body. So understandably, it's going to be very strenuous and it is going to be sore, but no different from any other muscle. Out of curiosity, how heavy are you deadlifting at the moment?
So I just deadlifted, uh, 2 or 3 hours ago, and so what did I put on there? Like the bar plus 85 or 90, so 135.
Yeah. All
Yeah, I
right.
mean
Very
it's
good.
I'm a pretty I mean I'm not a big guy, so for me that's a lot, and
Yeah.
and it's taken a long time to work up to that point.
What's your, if you don't mind me asking, what's your weight?
130,
Okay.
132.
So
Yeah,
lifting almost your body weight, or well, a little bit over your body weight.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Nice. And that's usually like a benchmark I like to give people as like how heavy should I be lifting? I usually just throw that benchmark out there because sometimes they're lifting 40 kilos or 40 pounds and they're saying, oh, when do I stop? Like when's enough? And I sort of throw that out there. You want to be lifting over your body weight, and they sort of say, oh, okay, wow, that's a lot, and um, sort of respects, it gives them a bit of a benchmark or a bit of a at least a reality check of how heavy you should and could be lifting. Um, so yeah, good that you've worked your way up to that because that's quite impressive.
Yeah, and I remember asking you again, like, when can I stop increasing my weight? And one thing that you said was, well, you want to run an ultra, you want to run, a 50 miler, 100 miler, you're not there yet. So you're going to need to get stronger to get to that distance. And I kind of like that. So
Mm,
I kind of feel like, okay, this weight is good enough for me to run a marathon distance at this pace, but if I want to go faster, I may need to get stronger. So that's kind of my mindset right now.
yeah, and you can, I almost like sometimes answering that question myself with the opposite. It's like, okay, when should I stop progressing the weights? And that makes me think of a scenario where someone's, let's just say a runner, they're running 5K 3 times a week, they're getting no symptoms whatsoever. and they're satisfied with that. They don't want to get faster. They don't want to run further. They've sort of capped out what they want to do, and they're satisfied with that, with no athletic endeavors beyond that. And they're doing, their deadlifts that are pretty heavy. I'd say, okay, let's tap it out. Let's, maybe maintain that and keep running, keep doing that. But if you ever so choose to run further, run faster, prepare for a race, that's when the deadlifts need to ramp up. And it's just trying to match the demands that you set upon it. Excellent, mate. Well, as we wrap up, are there any other sort of tidbits, bits of advice, someone who might be struggling with PHT and want that little bit of advice, anything that we haven't necessarily talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I really empathize with the listener out there that is suffering from this and who has almost given up, because I've been there and I was searching social media sites and, I mean, I've been there, and I want to, say to you that there is hope. I mean, you may have to change your expectations. You may have to, not be able to run that sub 3 that you wanted to do, but you can get better. And I was, like I say, I really struggled. And my first piece of advice is there is hope. And you may not regain all that you have, but you may have to make some concessions to the way you're running, but you can get back to running. It's possible. The other thing is, I think the correct exercises, for your particular injury state is important. The correct amount of weight and the correct amount of progression, like we talked about, and then to be patient. Those are the things that I would, say.
Yeah. Oh, I just wrote down patience because I wanted to reinforce that, but you've gone ahead and said it anyway. It's good to see that. I was just chatting to someone today and they were like, oh, how about collagen supplements? Is that effective? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I can't really find research that proves or disproves it. But I said to them, what I do know is that the vast majority of people get better with slow, heavy load without collagen, without PRPs, without like 10X and all that sort of stuff that you've listed. It's back to basics, and it's patience, and it's progress, and it's, the vast majority of people will get better with that particular routine. And if that's not working, then go back to the drawing board, maybe with some slight alterations, making slight tweaks here and there. Like say you almost hit the mark early with some loading and seeing some initial success, but then just not progressing, not having that guidance to say, okay, let's progress from here and let's be patient with it. It's something that, a lot of sufferers do need to have, because it's a whirlwind of a condition. You can be pulled in so many different directions, and you can start with stretching, you can start with PRP, and then you can talk about surgery down the track. Like you're just pulled in so many different directions and there's so much confusion. But back to basics, and you're a good story to show that yes, it does take time. Yes, you may need to readjust your expectations, but with enough time and enough structure, it can work.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Thanks for coming on, Rob. This was an incredible story. Best of luck with your ultra endeavors, returning back there and getting a marathon PB. It's good that you've found yourself in a situation where you're so much better that you're actually looking in the sights of PBs and returning to ultras. So always a good sign. So thanks for coming on and sharing.
Thank you, Brodie. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks once again for listening and taking control of your rehab. If you are a runner and love learning through the podcast format, then go ahead and check out the Run Smarter podcast, hosted by me. I'll include the link along with all the other links mentioned today in the show notes. So open up your device, click on the show description, and all the links will be there waiting for you. Congratulations on paving your way forward towards an empowering, pain-free future. And remember, knowledge is power.